Coinbase receives 1.5 million job applications a year, far too many for any human team to properly assess. So, how are they using AI to democratize access to the company? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 779 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Application volumes have surged in recent years, and many talent acquisition teams are struggling to keep up. Candidates apply and disappear into a black hole, never hearing back, never getting a real chance to show what they can do. When volumes reach into the millions, the traditional recruiting model simply breaks. There aren't enough recruiters to give everyone a fair hearing. Some organisations are now rethinking this entirely, using AI not to replace human decision-making, but to open the door wider than any human team alone ever could. So what does it actually look like when a company goes AI first across all the stages of hiring? My guest this week is LJ Brock, Chief People Officer at Coinbase. In our conversation, he explains how they've deployed AI across 5 core areas of recruiting, why they now assess every candidate on AI fluency, their focus on talent density to constantly raise the quality bar, and what hiring will look like in the future. Hi, LJ, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, my name's LJ Brock. I, for the last 7 years, have been the Chief People Officer at Coinbase. We're obviously one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. In that role, I lead all aspects of the people team, hiring, total rewards, learning and development, talent management, our employee experience group. Before that, I spent 3 years at Citadel, the hedge fund and market maker, where I was also the Chief People Officer. And then before that, I spent 8 years at Red Hat, which was or is an enterprise software company and open source. When I started at Red Hat, was the global head of recruiting, and over the 8 years I was there, sort of expanded my remit into more areas of HR, and that's how I headed down the path of being a Chief People Officer.
Very cool. And obviously, from a talent acquisition hiring perspective, very disruptive time at the moment for lots of reasons, whether that's technology or the economy or whatever it is. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the way companies approach hiring? What are the sort of the best patterns that you're seeing, and how's your sort of own thinking evolved, over time in terms of the situation that we're in right now?
Yeah, I think that, one of the broader trends I think we're seeing, certainly at least I think in the tech space, is a shift from volume, right? Where there was many years, let's say from after the 2008 financial crisis, all the way up until, last couple of years. So probably like a good 14, 15-year run where there was just a huge emphasis on the volume of hiring, on sort of a very traditional pyramid in technology companies. I think what you're seeing in the shift today, both maybe because of the economic environment, because of AI, is an overall trend towards less focus on volume and more focus on quality and value, and how you really find fewer people that are incredibly strong fits for your organization and have great capabilities. And the value of each hire at all levels, I think, is increasing. And then for me, what's generally top of mind as sort of a derivative of that is I do think as we're seeing these models improve from the AI vendors, I do think we're at the very beginning of seeing how that is beginning to impact some of the nature of the workforce. And I do think there's probably a looming shift in organizational composition where I do think that, the traditional pyramid may be more challenged in so much as I think some of the early in career work that many people do may not need to be done by people anymore. There'll be AI agents that can do that work. And your investment in hiring early in career will largely be to develop people more rapidly into middle and senior roles that are leveraging those AI agents.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it's certainly very disruptive, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Talent density is really the phrase that's sort of generating a lot of discussion around this, and it kind of obviously it speaks to what you were just sort of talking about. What does that mean in terms of Coinbase, and how do you achieve it? How do you achieve some of the things that you just spoke about?
I think for us at the end of the day, the bottom line, talent density is about constantly raising the bar, your talent bar. And that plays out probably in a couple of ways. I mean, from a hiring perspective, it plays out in a world where we want to make sure that every hire we make is in some way raising the average of the capability of the firm. We're trying to pull the average up. And then similarly for for everyone once they're here, for our existing people, the way that we think about talent density is that the expectations continue to amp up. That, what got you to be successful in 2025, we're going to crank up and ask people to get a little more efficient, a little more impactful, and have a little bit better capability, and incrementally raise the bar across the organization. So for us, I think talent density is just it's really about not pausing and being satisfied. It's about constantly raising expectations in hiring and in performance in a reasonable way and supporting people through those raised expectations, but being focused on continual improvement, continual learning to stay ahead of the market at large.
Coming back to talk about AI, I mean, from an AI perspective, how are you using AI to sort of really help you do this? How is it contributing? What is it helping you achieve?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a couple of ways to think about this for us. First, from a hiring perspective, I think of us as like AI first across the board. We have at least 5 core technologies that we've deployed in our hiring process, including AI-powered phone screens. Over a year ago, I laid out a vision for the team where I told them, I want anybody to be able to click a button and say, start interview now, and interview any time of day, anywhere, remotely, with our virtual assistant. And we get upwards of 1.5 million applicants a year. AI in that sense is a great way to sort of democratize access to the company, because there was no way we were ever going to have a large enough team to get to 1.5 million applicants. Now we have a tool that can do that. We have an AI-driven sourcing tool that's helping us, better match candidates. We have an AI tool that help us transcribe interviews and rate interview performance. We have an AI tool that helps us with our scheduling. So we've gone AI first to permeate every aspect of the recruiting lifecycle. I think from a HR perspective, AI is sort of the leading front is clearly in the recruiting world. And then as it relates to the company at large, we put in an AI fluency framework that we're now evaluating everybody on. So we want to make sure that we are hiring people in the same way we just talked about talent density, that are net accretive to the AI capabilities of our existing workforce. So now when you interview at Coinbase, you're getting evaluated to some degree relative to your role on your AI fluency and your ability to use AI to be more efficient and more effective in your role.
That's really interesting. What are the kind of the levels that you have there? How does that work in practice? What are you actually sort of looking for in most roles?
It can vary by role, right? So in an engineering capacity, we can have an assessment that asks people to use AI coding tools to help them be more efficient. For more of our roles and sort of our core our core back office operations, if you will, so sort of like, marketing, finance, HR, legal, we often give people work trials where we ask them to sort of perform some type of work and present that work. We can ask them to do that, including AI, and share with us how they used AI. So we're actually sort of decentralizing this to every hiring manager and asking them, what's the reasonable way to evaluate AI fluency for the role you're hiring for? And then we work with them to sort of build a custom application The core thing is we want to make sure we're checking the box, that we're finding people who have interest and capability in using AI in some capacity in their role. That varies a lot by the type of role and the level of the person. And then the assessment varies based on that as well.
And you obviously mentioned that obviously with the volume of applications that you've got, it makes perfect sense that AI is a fantastic opportunity to kind of widen access, democratize that sort of opportunity. At the same time, how do you balance using AI to handle that kind of volume of interest with the human connection that people expect in the hiring process? How do you kind of make that balance?
Yeah, I mean, let me be clear. We're not removing human involvement from our hiring process. We're trying to augment our hiring process to reach more people. And so I think of AI as works best still with human involvement and really complementing our workflows. We haven't replaced interviewers, so you may do that first AI interview, and then that just helps us better match people based on their experience and their interview questions to move forward to a recruiter interview. We still have, several steps of in-person interviews for people. So by no means do I think there's a world, I don't know, can't see far around the corner, but right now I can tell you, we're not thinking around a world that says, oh, you get hired at Coinbase without human intervention and a lot of human interaction. We see that as essential to us, both making the right selections, making the right connections with our potential employees, and really making sure that people understand, why they should want to work at Coinbase. So for us, it's just about augmenting our capability, getting to more people, and making the best decision possible.
And coming back to talent density, you were talking about, constantly sort of raising the hiring bar. What advice would you give to the TA leaders who are listening in terms of how to do that? I mean, what are the signals? What should they be looking for to know that they're getting that transformation?
Well, the first thing I think that, one thing I think about in this is, TA leader, I don't think does today anywhere, but, can't be working in a vacuum. I think you have to understand, what are the signals of high performance and high trajectory inside your company? Use the data that you have around people who are raising your average internally and identify, the key aspects that are allowing them to outperform. And then I think you want to see how can you then backtrack that into your selection process, right? And begin to pressure test people for those attributes. So for me, this is less about some really unique, different way of doing things and more about having the rigor to understand what differential performance looks like in your org, and then having the thoughtfulness and the rigor to apply that into your assessment process. And I think, for a lot of companies, that's going to vary. For us, we added things in like cognitive assessments on the front end. And, we've had, as I said, work trials, and we've continued to evolve those work trials. But I think for other organizations, they may look different depending on, what they see as the attributes of the people who are raising the bar already inside the organization.
It's obviously a very difficult question to ask about the future. But as a final question, what do you think it's going to look like? I mean, how hiring and talent acquisition going to evolve over the next sort of 3 to 5 years? Or how do you hope they're going to evolve?
My best guess on this is that I think all of recruiting will look more and more like executive recruiting. I think that, look, I grew up in a world of I shared with you, I worked at Red Hat. I was there when we were 2,500 people. We grew to, I don't know, almost 10,000 people before I left. I joined Coinbase and it was 700 people. We got to 7,000 people within 3 years. Much of our recruiting engine at the time, I think for many tech companies, was around a high volume process that could have high standards, but was really more around processing workflows at scale. I think AI is going to change the work landscape, as I've said to you earlier. And I think it's going to attack a lot of that and handle a lot of that process at scale. And I think where recruiters are going to become even more valuable, I think recruiters are going to become even more valuable. But I think it's going to be a very different work. It's probably going to be less around sourcing and less around the ability to manage workflows at scale, and more about the ability to craft and lead a process that has a really refined outcome on picking the best candidate for every level. So when you're hiring an entry-level person, I think you're going to be hiring at a level that's probably more detailed and more crafted and with more sort of precision insights into why they would be right, like you would have done in exec recruiting in the past. And that's kind of where we're seeing our team go already.
That's a really interesting perspective, and I 100% agree with you on that one. LJ, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, happy to do it. Really appreciate you making the time. Great to be here.
My thanks to LJ. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.